Good morning. These readings are from the book Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading, we are children of the light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It is common for people to perceive themselves according to their present realities. A person in ill health says, "I am ill." Few people say, "I am well." It is my body that is suffering. People in a low income bracket say, "I am poor." Only an unusual person will say, "Though outwardly I live in poverty, inwardly I am wealthy." Thus, when it comes to moral and spiritual development, people commonly identify themselves with their weaknesses and their mistakes. They consider it almost a sign of humility to say, "I'm a sinner." Though in effect, what this means is they identify themselves with their sinfulness, not with the soul's power to transcend all limitations of God in God. The great masters, including Jesus Christ, have always emphasized the divine potential of mankind. To encourage us, they address us as children of light, not of darkness. The Bible, in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, makes the point that our true home is not the mud of this earth, but in the light of heaven. No man hath ascended up to heaven, it tells us, but him that came down from heaven. This passage continues, "Even so, the Son of Man who is in heaven," emphasizing that Jesus, though he lived on earth, is perceived by the eye of wisdom as consciousness, even in human form, of his true reality in heavenly spheres. The way to know God is to live in godly consciousness, and not to bewail our imperfection and our distance from God. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And the Bhagavad Gita states, "The seekers of union with the Lord find him dwelling in their own hearts, but those who, lacking in wisdom, seek him with impure motives cannot perceive him, however much they struggle to do so." If you want to know God, Paramahansa Yogananda said, live in the thought that you have him already. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om.
Everyone. For those who may not know us, I am Nayaswami Surendra. I'm here with Nayaswami Bharati and also with Tyagi Pavani, and it is our privilege and our pleasure to be with you this morning. I'd like to begin with a reading from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. This is, "Make us transparent, that thy light may shine through us unimpeded. The sunbeams of thy love shine equally on all the members of thy cosmic family, whether prophet, hero, villain, tiny moth, or me. It is our own fault if we make ourselves opaque by our own mental and emotional dullness. Teach us to wipe away the dirt of error from the windows of our understanding. Our arms are weak for the task, owing to our long inner spiritual resistance. O Master Cleanser, lend power to our efforts, that we may wipe away every last spot that clings to our minds, obscuring our transparency and preventing free entry into thy light. O make us fully clean again, invisible in our egos because transmitting only visions of thy beauty which lies within us." have a wonderful topic this morning from our reading. Let me begin by asking you a very silly question. Do you have trouble remembering your name? Or where you live? Or what your favorite pastimes are? You do, huh, Bill? I've seen you at home. I know you know where you live. But I mention this for a very important reason. We have, each of us a mental file of memories that is important to us, that is central to our ideals and our identity. And some of these help us to navigate through the course of a day. Some fill us with gladness, others are essential to our well-being. But it's interesting and amazing that we so easily forget the most important thought of all, that we are children of the light, endowed with divine consciousness, created of and by the mind of God. We're not just flesh and bone. We're not the sum of our successes and failures. We're not our name, age, sex, or even the level of our intelligence. We are the wondrous expression of our divine souls. Can you imagine anything more encouraging and inspiring? And yet, in the course of a difficult day, this is probably the farthest thought from our minds. We forget, don't we? We forget that we are more than this human condition, that we are spiritual beings who are merely having a temporary human experience. In the Festival of Light, which we'll read a little bit later, Swami Kriyananda urges us to realize the true nature of our souls when he says, "O children of light, forsake the darkness. Know that forever you and he are one." You and he are one. And still we manage to lose sight of this as soon as we hit a hard bump in the road. And the reason is very understandable. We are surrounded by a kind of craziness called Maya, delusion. And because it is almost everywhere, it is so easy to fall into its traps. We have desires and ambitions. We have problems and responsibilities. We get upset. We get tired. There are days when the gravity that holds our feet to the ground seems to pull even more heavily on our hearts and on our minds. Master said that the nature of this planet is rajasic, restless. It is the opposite of calm. And you know this for a fact yourselves. When our likes and dislikes come on strong, so do our emotions. And when our emotions are strong, they are the ones that are influencing the choices that we make. We're still children of the light. But what has happened is we've allowed clouds to roll into our consciousness just as they do on a sunny day when the weather shifts and the sky turns gray. We can make those clouds disappear. It takes determination, willpower, and energy. Or, as we often do, we can allow them to develop into storm clouds, which simply bring more turbulence into our lives. God has endowed us with free will. Is it a blessing or is it a curse? It always depends simply on how you choose to apply it. How do you apply your free will? As disciples of these great masters, we are the beneficiaries of teachings and guidance that are more powerful, more insightful, and of supreme intelligence, much more so than we can acquire at any of our finest universities. I speak from experience. I was fortunate to attend one of those universities, and I can tell you that from a standpoint of wisdom and practicality, what I learned back then cannot compare with what I have learned since coming to Ananda and being exposed to these teachings. And just as an aside, to illustrate, I remember when I was in college, I took classes in political science. Political science. Now there is an oxymoron, if there ever was one. Where in the world is there any science in what is being practiced as politics today? If universities are going to offer such a curriculum, I think they would be better to call it the science of political ignorance. Especially, in exposing us to what politicians do or are supposed to do and very seldom do. It seems that politics today is more about causing trouble and then applying the wrong remedy to fix it. And yet, even the worst politicians are children of the light. God loves them as much as he loves any of us, as much as he loves Jesus. That is unconditional love. But back to this morning's topic. These masters are not merely professors and scholars. They are self-realized avatars. They don't dabble in data and the latest theories. Their knowledge is of the highest dimensions, the astral plane, the causal plane, the very consciousness of God. Can you think of a greater opportunity to acquire the ways of wisdom than the one that we have right here? I often wonder why it is that I ever allow my ego to interfere with the choices I make, with the guidance that I receive from these masters. But the fact is, we all have our karmic battle. Our battle to fight, just as Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. It's a battle against those familiar cousins within us that cause us so much trouble. Our habits, our moods, our emotions, desires, our attachments. It's a battle that continues until we attain our final freedom, our liberation. And only we can decide if we want to strive harder now and get to that freedom sooner, or retreat back into the ego and have it just simply take a much longer time. Swamiji said many times, Swami Kriyananda, that we can be Jivan Muktas, freed of ego consciousness by the time that we reach the end of this incarnation. But it takes great effort. And somewhere down that long litany of lifetimes, we are going to be cleansed of our karma. And in purity, we will merge again with God. This is the promise that we've been given. These masters have declared that it is our destiny. And so in view of the stresses and sufferings that we inevitably and invariably endure every time we have to come back to such an existence as this one, it seems a mighty good idea to make that effort now, to try harder now, and to attain that freedom as soon as we possibly can. Years ago, when Tushti and I lived in Honolulu, we had the good fortune to study karate with a former Japanese champion. We called him Shihan, which was a title of honor, like Swami. And I'm sure that he was, in a previous life, a great Swami, probably a Swami of samurai nature, perhaps, because that's certainly what he brought to this incarnation. He was a very high soul, very strong inside and out, but also humble and generous. And I know that he and Master would have been great friends. They had a lot in common. Because no matter how strict he appeared, there was always a twinkle in his eye that was loving and delightful. At the beginning of every karate class, we, the students, would line up and we would bow as a way of declaring our readiness to practice whatever it was that Shihan was going to teach. And then he would come forward and in a booming voice, much like Master used to do when he would run onto the stage, he would say, "How do you feel today?" You feel good? Okay. But maybe you feel tired. Maybe you have headache. Makes no difference how you feel. When enemy come, unless you fight, maybe you die. I think about those last two sentences a lot. You know, you have to try harder. We always have to be trying harder no matter how we feel. Shihan, in his broken English, was referring to the enemy, not as someone necessarily who would do us harm. He, like Yogananda, was referring to every attractive delusion that takes us off this path. That is the real enemy. Maybe it's something that seems insignificant, like skipping your meditation today. Or maybe it's something more serious, like considering doing something unethical. But even the slightest deviation from Dharma, from right action, diminishes our spirituality. And that is why when enemy come, make no difference how you feel. If you no fight, maybe you die. Maybe you die to the opportunity you've been given to overcome a troublesome karma. If you want to succeed against any challenge, you must meet it with a strong will and plenty of energy, no matter what. That's because you are not only a child of the light, you must also be a warrior of the light. Just like Shihan, just like Swami Kriyananda, life is a test of our inner resources. As devotees, we know that everything comes from God and that everything happens for a purpose. And that purpose is meant for our spiritual growth and opportunity to act for our spiritual growth. Whether or not you succeed in overcoming every challenge, always remember what Master repeatedly said to his disciples. We read it in this morning's reading. Live in the thought that you have God already. You are truly divine. As devotees, we want this to be our affirmation. And when we act in that awareness, our progress on this path truly accelerates. Life can be hard. And when it is, let Swamiji, let his life be your guide. Swamiji lived with absolute faith in God and gurus, and it enabled him to overcome every difficulty, no matter how severe, with bliss in his heart. I believe that Swami literally became the light. And what he is wanting us to see now, what he is trying to show us from his vast heavenly abode, is that we can be just like him. God bless you. Let's take a moment of silence.